Kavanaugh, and you're watching Eyewitness News. We've just received word that a terrible tragedy is occurring in the Philippines. 76,000 prisoners have been taken by the Japanese, approximately 12,000 Americans involved. Elizabeth Brennan has more on the case.
The Japanese tortured the prisoners and deprived them of food, water, and made them stay outside in the hot sun. They gave the water to horses and pretended to give the prisoners food, but then took it away. Thousands have been murdered.
Their families don't know their location, and we've had reports of people being murdered in front of their friends. This Bataan death march gave Japan more territory in the South Pacific, increasing their power in the war. Many American soldiers were lost.
The Axis side thinks the Allies are weak for surrendering because in their culture it is dishonorable. The Allies view the Axis powers as cruel, brutal people who just want to murder. And now we have some American survivors from this Bataan death march. Fred Goldvinson is up first.
Before we could grasp what was happening, the black-faced giant had swung his sword. I remember how the sun flashed on it. There was a swish and kind of chopping thud, like a cleaver going through beef. The captain's head seemed to jump off his shoulders. It hit the ground in front of him and went rolling crazily from side to side between the lines of prisoners. The body fell forward. I have seen wounds, but never such a gush of blood as this. The heart continued to pump for a few seconds. At each beat there was another great spurt of blood. The white dust around our feet was turned into crimson mud. I saw the hands were opening and closing spasmodically. Then I looked away. When I looked again, the big Jap had put his sword and was strolling off. The runt who had found me again was putting them into his pocket. He helped himself to the captain's possessions. That was the first murder.
And now we have
Another terrible person who had to deal with this tragedy.
Daniel Lemmermeyer. Give him a round of applause for coming back.
Eventually the road became so crowded we were marched into a clearing. Here for 2 hours we had our first taste of the Oriental sun treatment, which drains the stamina and weakens the spirit. The Japs seated us on the scorching ground, exposed to the full glare of the sun. Many of the Americans and the Filipinos had no covering to protect their heads. I was beside a small bush, but it cast no shade because the sun was almost directly above us. Many of the men were ill. When I thought I could stand the penetrating heat no longer, I was determined to have a sip of the tepid water in my canteen. I had no more than unscrewed the top of the aluminum flask, was snatched from my hands. The Jap who crept up behind me poured the water into his horse's nose bag, then threw down the canteen. He walked on among the prisoners, taking away their water and pouring it into the bag. When we had enough, he gave it to the horse.
This is awful. Obviously, as you can see, this is a terrible happening that is going on in the Philippines right now.
And the Japanese are just cruel people for putting people through this.
And thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for helping us in coming.
Okay, and now our last guest here is William Chauvinson.
Being here, William.
Oh, thanks for having
It means a
me.
lot to us that you could tell the Americans about the brutal
It really does.
During fun, and as we know, the dropouts began. It seemed that a great many of the prisoners reached the end of their endurance at about the same time. They went down by twos and threes. Usually they made an effort to rise. I never can forget their groans and strangling breathing as they tried to get up. Some succeeded. Others lay lifelessly where they had fallen.
Oh, God. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all of our guests for being here. To share the painful stories that not many will be able to speak about. In the war, we just hope to win. We hope that America will be able to pull through this.
The Bataan Death March was a terrible thing that happened, and I'm sorry for all of the people who have lost
And
their
for the
family members.
families.
Yes.
We will, every new piece of information we get, Eyewitness News promises to keep you informed.
You'll be updated as soon as we find out.
Thank you everyone for watching, and help us pray for the wounded and dead soldiers.
And the people just laying on the ground because they died.